Hey, so it's Saturday morning and I was getting ready to go to the gym, but of course I woke up this morning thinking about this microservices architecture that I've been building to support our courses and for basically Gen AI, right? So this goal of this, I'm not going to go through any code, but what I want to talk about is the reason that I use a product called Qodo Gen. It's QODO Gen. They have a couple of other products, but what it is, it's AI plugin, code generator, things like that. And so the thing that I like about it, and I'm going to explain why in more detail, is the thing I like about it is it basically does RAG on your whole code base. Right now, I have just a developer version, and so I only do it on one code base, but basically it can read in my code base and then answer questions and help me go through without having to cut and paste and things like that. And I know Cursor and some of the other IDEs can handle the code base. I like the way that Qodo does it because not only can it handle the code base, but if you do things like I take in documentation from I'm working on the tracing app, how to implement tracing into Gen AI and evaluations. And so I dropped in the Arize Phoenix documentation and also the LangChain doc. And when you do that, it reads that up and it's in the RAG system. So I can talk to it about my code in relation to other products. So it's pretty cool. But the thing that I was worried about is that working on this, implementing this RAG, so I don't want to shut that down, implementing this ability service, and I got it plugged in and it's working okay. But if you go into, all right, let me go back to my page here. If I go into something like my knowledge assistance service, right, this is where it starts off. And I take a look at going to the source and look in main, and I plugged in observability, and then I'm eventually going to plug in guardrails, right? This is like a decent chunk of code. Right now I can extract this out and just import it and make it easier to read and things like that. And that's all cool. And I was looking at doing that. I got it dropped in an observability service in here to pull in the code from an SDK that I've written. So you got the SDK that's doing the observability. Again, I'll go through more detail on this code in a future video. So you can subscribe. I'm going to do a lot of videos on evaluation and how to do evaluation-driven development and fit it inside your full framework, CI/CD pipelines with Gherkin, things like that. You can subscribe, and I'll go into this code in more detail. But so you see that. So this is the knowledge and service, right? So this is the beginning, but then this knowledge service calls a rewards query service. This is basically my RAG backend, right? So if I look into this and I go into the main, look what happens, right? So I'm implementing this code. Now, again, I can refactor it out so that it's in one spot in this code base. And so I was thinking about this, and this to me is just messy, right? Obviously, there's a lot of repeated code. This boilerplate code looks exactly the same as the other code, right? So now to get to the point of this whole craziness, right? So I'm thinking about this last night, woke up this morning and did a little extra research and determined that there were a couple things I wanted to do, right? So some of this is new to me. So I'm learning about observability, and I started looking into monkey patching and auto-instrumentation and things like that. So I was toying around in another OpenAI, in another ChatGPT session, and then just talking through, trying to get my head around what I was doing. Sometimes if I focus too much on the code, I have a tendency to get bogged down in the details and it gets a little stressed out. So I went in, and in Qodo, you can do a couple different things, right? You can either code, or there are a bunch of different modes. We can talk about those later. But what I did was I wanted to just talk through this, right? So I put it in plan mode. I'm using ChatGPT 5. It does allow you to add, you can use agents and things like that, but I'm just using some basic stuff. Get file system and terminal. Nice thing is that if you're playing with Docker or something like that, it'll actually help you do it, and then you can run it in the terminal. But anyway, the point is that what I wanted to do is I wanted to work through my architecture, and I wanted to get it more consolidated into the SDK, and then use annotations to set up the trace steps. So I figured that would be cleaner. And so all I did was I come in and give it the instructions. Look, I want to review the way we're doing tracing using the Observability SDK. Again, I wanted to give it some context. If you see that I started with at Aria, that's the high level folder in my project. It's early, right? So in my project. So basically I'm telling it to look at all this code. So I tell it I want to do this, and I let it know the code's working, but I received the following advice from a software architect. Doesn't need to know it's another ChatGPT, whatever. So I tell it that, and I say, please review the advice, take a look at what I'm doing, basically, and then let's talk through this. How do we refactor it? So the advice was basically I want the spans. Span is the hierarchy of your traces, right? So it starts with the knowledge server, goes and does some RAG stuff. It calls the LLM. I want that all in one span so I can see the traces in context, right? So I want to use the observability SDK that I've already built. And I just want to include the middleware with one import and make sure that I'm using request IDs and the common attributes all the way through the traces. Use the SDK decorators around domain steps, retrieve, re-rank, and run under auto-instrumentation. And so the nice thing is that some of these things, like I don't have any decorators in my SDK yet, right? And so it goes through. Now this is Qodo Gen, the agent, going through, and it says, all right, in order for me to do that, I need to take a look at your code. So I'm going to go to your files, and it lists the files that it looked at. Right? It's cool. And basically it's telling you what it found, right? So it went through, it doing some inspection. Thinks it found what it's looking for. So now it's going to go into a little bit more detail. And so now that it's done, it says, let's review and map the architect's advice into what you're doing. Summary of the current state, where it goes through. And if you read this, it's true. Map in the architectural advice. So you want to import your own SDK. Add one facet drive. So it's basically repeating the instructions, right? And so then it comes through, and this is the cool part, right? How does it align today? Import your SDK. Already done. You have access to services. One middleware requests IDs. You're partially, right? So you have your middleware, and it standardizes out to trace contents, but it doesn't generate or enforce a request ID, and doesn't attach a response header log, right? So then the SDK decorators for your domain, not present. Manual spans are implemented with service methods. Decorators don't exist in the SDK, and instrumentation logic is duplicated. That's the exact thing that I was worried about. And so then it comes through again and basically just gives me more assessment. And then, so now it's going to give me some observations, and then gaps versus advice, and then puts together an architectural plan, right? And so it starts talking about the architectural design documentation requirement, ADR. Is that what it stands for? I just say ADR so much, I forgot why, whatever. So it goes through and it does this definition. Now, I'm not going to go through all this, but goes through, gives me some sample code of what it might look like, talks about the decorators that I should create and what it would look like and how to pull it in, right? So take a look at this. This is already, you see what I have here. This is just a setup. And then in the service, in the rewards query service, here's where I basically got to plug it in. Here's the log. What do I want to log? Want to keep in? I'm set up for guardrails, so ignore that. Probably pull that out too. I don't like it. I don't like it. So you can see, and then this is repeated in the other services. Now, one of the things is that when you look at products and videos like Arize, Phoenix, Arize, open source, cool. If you go through, they have a lot of notebooks and you set it up and it looks like, hey, this tracing's cool. It just works. But the second you start to build a full architecture around it, a full microservices architecture, you got to take a look at how you're managing the traces to make sure everything stays connected. And then I want to there's an open telemetry instrumentation required. So that does auto instrumentation. So if you fire up your application with open telemetry instrument, you get a lot of nice backends, right? Basically monkey patches in Python. So again, the whole point of this video is to talk to you about why I think Qodo Gen is so freaking cool, right? So I'll follow up videos where I actually implement this and I'll show you how much cleaner it's going to look. So I'm pretty excited about it, but I don't know why when I do research and I like the idea of using AI to help me generate code. I think the new wave of developers, that's the way we're going to be doing code. And so I think it's important to understand why some of these IDEs are better than others. And the reason Qodo Gen kind of stands out for me is that, again, I can put in my whole code base. I know Cursor does, they claim they do it. I've used some of the others. This has been the best to me, and I think it's cool. So anyhow, don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to do a ton of videos on LLM evaluation, and I'm working on those now. I'm putting together some training courses. And as I work through the code, I'll drop it into YouTube. So hope you like this. Check out Qodo Gen. I'll put a link in here. By the way, I'm not getting any paid. I don't have reference, whatever that is. I don't get paid at all, Qodo Gen. I just love the tool. I don't know why people are talking about it more. All right, have fun.